Today we have our speaker Bedros Dermatosyan. He was here last year, but we decided to invite him once again this year. We clearly like Bedros very much. Bedros is an assistant professor of modern Middle Eastern history in the Department of History at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln. He will be in our neighborhood in the spring because he's going to be a visiting professor in Armenian Studies at the University of Chicago in the Department of Near Eastern Languages and Cultures. Born and raised in the Muslim quarter of Jerusalem, his childhood milieu has shaped his both politics, I think, and research interests. He is, in a way, a product of the Ottoman legacy. Dermatosyan graduated from the Hebrew University of Jerusalem, where he began his studies in the Department of Islamic and Middle Eastern Studies. He completed a PhD in 2008 in Middle Eastern history at Columbia University. His dissertation, entitled Ethnic Politics in Post-Revolutionary Ottoman Empire, Armenians, Arabs, and Jews during the Second Constitutional Period, 1908-1909, or the Young Turk Revolution, one of, let's see what the historiography really claims, our new generation is changing it, but considered to be a landmark of the dissolution of the Ottoman Empire. In his dissertation, he dealt with interethnic politics during this era, studying the context that led to a dramatic escalation of ethnic tensions, challenging and culminating in the counter-revolution and in the Adana massacres of 1909. He has now turned his dissertation into what will be two books. Shattered Dreams of a Revolution, Politics, Religion, and Ethnicity in the Ottoman Empire is forthcoming in 2014 from Stanford University Press, and a second manuscript in progress on revolution and violence, the Adana massacres of 1909. He's fluent in Armenian, Arabic, Hebrew, Ladino, Ottoman, Turkish, German, and French, languages that allow him to engage in the comparative study of politics in the late Ottoman Empire, exploring how many minority groups like Armenians, Greeks, Jews, Kurds, and Alevis all related to the 1908 Young Turk Revolution. Today, he will be speaking about inter- and intra-confessional politics, bringing into dialogue Istanbul with Mount Lebanon and Jerusalem. Please join me in welcoming Bedros Dermatosyan.
Thank you, Catherine. You overburdened me now with all of that, feeling that I have to now, present something extraordinary. Thank you very much for inviting me again here. It's an honor to be here again. My talk would be based on religious politics, discussing religious politics in the Ottoman Empire and the way in which revolution influenced religious politics within the empire. The picture that you see is the picture of the main courtyard of St. James Brotherhood, where I grew up actually, spent most of my time, and represents the historicity of my life to that extent also. So I will start with with providing a certain background and then enter into discussion with regards to the impact of the revolution on the Armenians of Istanbul, and mostly ecclesiastic politics, on impact of the revolution, ecclesiastic politics in Istanbul among Armenians and Jews, and then move on to a case study based on Jerusalem, the old city of Jerusalem, discussing the Armenian politics, ecclesiastic politics of the Patriarch in Jerusalem, and then the Jewish chief rabbinate of Jerusalem. But due to the shortness of time, I'm not going to discuss the Greek Patriarchate in Istanbul. I've written about it in a different place, but I'm not going to discuss about that. And then, of course, we're going to move also to Mount Lebanon to discuss the Maronite politics, the church politics. So the talk is mainly based on ecclesiastic politics, discussing ecclesiastic politics, which is a very important niche and aspect of the post-revolutionary period. 6 days after the revolution, Pyzant Kecheyan, the editor of Pyzantion, an Armenian daily in Istanbul, wrote a lengthy article about the downfall of the Armenian Patriarch Markia Ormanyan, who reigned 1896 to 1908. And I quote, "The strong current of freedom took away Ormanyan, Kecheyan, crowd. A day does not pass when we do not see the collapse of a major representative of the Ancien regime. It is true that we are living in a historical period, as it was for France in 1789 and in 1848 for all Europe, end quote. Kecheyan's words reverberated positively among some ethnic groups. For other groups, though, the period became a critical historical juncture that threatened their power, prestige, and status. Regardless of their outcome, revolutions profoundly changed the dynamics of power within their respective states and societies, and the 1908 revolution was no exception. For those disenfranchised people who were dreaming of freedom, equality, and justice, the revolution became their savior, the means by which a new and a better future would be achieved, and by which they themselves would be freed from the shackles of tyranny. For those elites who were worried about the revolution, however, it became their worst nightmare, shaking the pillars of their authority, endangering not only their power but also their survival. The lecture will deal with the impact of the Young Turk Revolution on religious politics among three ethnic groups in the Ottoman Empire: Armenian Orthodox, Sephardic and Ashkenazi Jews, and Arab Maronites. It examines the ways in which these groups internalized the revolution by creating their own ancien regimes, victories, and new era. Yet these various subordinate groups cannot be viewed in isolation of one another. They were interconnected and influenced one another directly and indirectly. At the time in which these transformations were taking place, new actors emerged within these communities, threatening the social and political stability of the existing orders and competing over the position of powers and representation. While the revolution aimed at the creation of a new Ottoman identity, which entailed that all ethnic and religious groups be brothers and equal citizens, it also required that all the groups abandon their distinct religious privileges. This caused much anxiety among the ethnic groups whose communities enjoyed the religious privileges bestowed on them by previous regime. Thus, despite its proclaimed aim to undo ethno-religious representations, the revolution nevertheless reinforced religious politics in different regions within the Ottoman Empire. In this paper or lecture, I'm going to examine the changes taking place among Christian and Jewish communities in Istanbul, Jerusalem, and Mount Lebanon. In recent years, excellent macrohistorical analysis have traced the impact of the revolution on the Ottoman state in terms of transition of power from the Sultan to the Ottoman Parliament and the Committee of Union and Progress, the interplay between the constitution and the Shariat, the tension between the executive and the legislative authorities, and the contention among the major political parties. In contrast, comparative examinations of the revolution's impact on the multi-ethnic composition of the Ottoman society have been scarce. Such studies are particularly challenging because the differences among the societal structures, religions, ethnicities, languages, and cultures of these groups outnumber their similarities. A comparative cross-cultural examination of these groups would provide a better picture with regards to the impact of and the reaction to the revolution. It would demonstrate how these different groups negotiate and redefine their positions by adapting themselves to and navigating through the new unstable period attained by the revolution. A brief overview of the major transformations that the Armenians, the Jews, and the Arabs experienced during the 19th century Ottoman Empire is necessary to a full understanding of the impact of the revolution had on the religious politics among these groups and the ways in which it changed the dynamics of power within these communities. One important point I would like to emphasize, and some of you know, and that's in the Ottoman administrative system, Armenians, Greeks, and Jews, unlike Arabs, were organized in semi-autonomous, unlike Muslim Arabs, were organized in semi-autonomous bodies called millats. Under the millat system, these groups enjoyed a wide array of religious and cultural freedoms in addition to substantial legal, fiscal, and administrative autonomy. During the 19th century, the Ottoman Empire initiated a series of reforms to strengthen its political power and preserve the integrity of its territories under the rubric of defensive developmentalism. This is well-known information. In total, there were 3 reform periods. The second reform period, known as the Tanzimat Reform Reordering Period, which started in 1839, ended in 1876, had a profound impact on the non-Muslim groups in the empire. These reforms were intended to secure the loyalty of the empire's Christian subjects at a time when nationalist agitations were rising in its European section. Consequently, they aimed to mold the notion of Ottomanism by breaking down the religious and cultural autonomy of the millets. Despite failing to attain this goal, these reforms made substantial changes in the dynamics of power in the non-Muslim communities. They resulted in the promulgation of constitutions and establishment of national assemblies among the non-dominant groups. The era of the Tanzimat reforms was halted by the regime of Sultan Abdul Hamid II. With the arrival of his absolutist rule, the dynamics of power once more shifted among these groups. In the case of the Armenian National Assembly, in the case of the Armenians, the National Assembly was prorogued. Patriarch Matthios Izmirilian was banished to Jerusalem for vehemently criticizing the Sultan's regime for the Armenian massacres of 1896. He was replaced by Patriarch Ormanian, Magakia Ormanian, mentioned earlier in this talk as the Patriarch of Istanbul. In the case of the Jews, Rabbi Moshe Halevi was appointed as the locum tenens in 1872, who refused to conduct elections until the Young Turk Revolution, and he was backed, as a matter of fact, by the Hamidian regime. On the other hand, as a result of Sultan Abdul Hamid's policy of pan-Islamism, he appointed the most conservative Arabs as his advisors. Thus, during the Hamidian regime, the Arab provinces of the empire gained more importance. While these transformations were taking place, an opposition group was being consolidated in the empire. This group, all of us know, calling itself the Young Turk Movement, emerged in the Ottoman Empire and its expatriate communities at the end of the 19th century. Their main political party, the Committee of Union and Progress, otherwise known as the CUP, became the dominant force within the movement. After 3 decades of relentless efforts and political activism, this group staged the Young Turk Revolution of 1908, reinstating the Ottoman constitution and opening the parliament. Thus, they launched what came to be known as the Second Constitutional Period from 1908 to 1918, which ended with the Ottoman defeat in World War I. Thus, we can say that within the context of these reforms, Armenians, Arabs, and Jews living in the Ottoman Empire were influenced by these transformations. In the case of the Armenians, they experienced 4 major transformations, I argue. Emergence of cultural nationalism as a result of the Armenian Renaissance, the Zartong, changing of the dynamics of power within the Armenian community after the introduction of the Armenian National Constitution and the formation of the Armenian National Assembly, the rise of the Armenian merchant class, and finally the deteriorating political condition of the eastern provinces that eventually led to the rise of the Armenian revolutionary movements. In the case of the Jews, they too experienced major transformation represented by changes in the dynamics of power of their community, by the introduction of a constitution and the establishment of a general assembly, the impact of the European Haskalah on the Ottoman Jewry, the proliferation of the educational system in the empire, which was mainly initiated by the Alliance Israélite Universelle, hence AUI, founded in Paris in 1860, and finally Zionism, which shaped, I argue, the fate of the Jews in the Ottoman Empire. Arabs also experienced major changes represented by the rise of the Arab notables, the Arab politics in the notable politics in the 19th century in the provinces, who assumed the role of intermediaries between the Ottoman state and their localities. The emergence of the Arab Renaissance and Nahda also represented a huge impact over the Arabs in the coastal towns and other major cities. Also, we can add to this the impact of the missionaries, European missionaries in Syria and Lebanon. So, on the eve of the revolution, these divergent groups were living in societal structures that were centuries old. This does not, however, mean that those societies were stagnant. Despite the prevailing status quo, these variegated groups were influenced by global and regional currents of change that affected the gradual transformation of their societies. Nonetheless, the revolution accelerated these transformations and attempted to create a rupture with the previous era that came to be known as the Ancien Regime. Examining the impact of the revolution on different social groups reveals that deep-rooted antagonisms that existed not only within the different stratums of society in general, but also within the different institutions of society, religious, military, and political alike. These antagonisms would manifest themselves in the post-revolutionary period and demonstrate as to why revolutions are more complex phenomenon than an attempt by many people within a society to topple a government and create a new one. The simple explanation, as some people would argue. The Young Turk Revolution became a milestone in defining intra-ethnic relationships in the Armenian millet of the empire. It resulted in a micro-revolution, culminating with the downfall of Patriarch Malakia Ormanyan, the reinstatement of the Armenian National Constitution, and the reopening of the Armenian National Assembly, the election of the Matthios II Izmirilian as Patriarch, and the surfacing of the Armenian political parties, the traditional parties, the Dashnaks, Hunchaks, Reformed Hunchaks, and the Ramgavars. The downfall of Patriarch Malakia Ormanyan represented the downfall of the Armenian Ancien regime and the beginning of a new era. Armenians, more than the Jews and the Maronites of the empire, internalized the Young Turk Revolution by creating their own Ancien regime and their own victory. The Armenian micro-revolution eliminated competing centers of power more successfully than the larger Young Turk Revolution. This is because whereas the Ancien regime of the Ottoman Empire during the post-revolution period was embodied in the Yıldız palace clique, the Armenian Ancien regime was embodied in one person, Patriarch Ormanyan. Puissant Kechayan described Ormanyan's dominance in the community in this way, and I quote, "He was everything, and as Louis XIV said, l'état c'est moi." Certainly Ormanyan could truly have declared, "I am the Patriarch, the Patriarchate, Religious Council, Political Council, Economic Committee, Financial Trustee, Judicial Committee, and Educational Committee," and Council, end quote. As a result of these attacks and criticism, Patriarch Ormanyan resigned immediately after the revolution. It's a long story of events that take place. I'm just trying to summarize here. Immediately after the resignation of Ormanyan, rumors spread in the capital that the ex-Patriarch Ormanyan had appropriated 30,000 gold pieces from the Patriarchate finances and was planning to run away. The rumor caused much agitation among the population of the capital. On the 7th of August 1908, people gathered in the streets of Valide Cheshmeh near Ormanyan's residence and demanded that he go to the Patriarchate in order to account for his actions. The demonstrators threatened that if he refused, they would take him by force. Ormanyan left his residence by a carriage surrounded by policemen and headed towards the Ministry of Police. Ormanyan became the ultimate spectacle of humiliation. Moreover, this procession of public humiliation represented the humiliation of the Ancien regime. They were cursing him and spitting on him on the way. The Ancien regime had to be dragged in the streets, humiliated and scolded in order to fulfill the aim of the revolution. In many parts of the provinces, local prelates were dismissed by the local Armenian population. Thus, the downfall of Ormanyan's regime was finalized by the re-election of Archbishop Matthios Izmirilian on November 4 as Patriarch of Istanbul, and he reigns only for a couple of months and then is elected as the Catholicos of all Armenians in Echmiadzin. The reinstatement of the Armenian National Constitution and the Armenian National Assembly, which became the center of the Armenian national policy making, is, in the empire, are important political processes in the post-revolution period which have been marginalized in the historiography of the Ottoman Empire. Scholars tend to reconstruct the history of the Armenians in the post-revolution period through the prism of Armenian political parties, whose role in the political process has been overly emphasized, I argue. The Armenian National Assembly contained most of the prominent Armenian clerical and lay figures in the empire. This included members of the Armenian political parties, Armenian members of the Ottoman Parliament, and representatives of different Armenian denominations. An examination of the debates of the Assembly sheds new light on the position of the Armenian leadership from the post-revolution period until the counter-revolution. In fact, when one examines the 25 sessions of the Armenian National Assembly from 1908 to 1909, one notices that utmost importance was given to the Armenian constitution. Constitutionalism became a key factor upon which the affairs of the community were administered. The National Assembly became a mini-parliament, which discouraged partisanship, at least in its earlier stages, and advocated loyalty to the empire. Three main issues characterized the debates in the Armenian National Assembly during this period: the formation of an investigation commission to investigate ex-Patriarch Ormanyan's deeds, the question of the eastern provinces, and the question of Jerusalem. Among these three, the question of Jerusalem demonstrates the ways in which religious politics occupied a central place in the post-revolutionary period. Of course, if we want to examine the most important issue for the Armenians in the post-revolutionary period, it was the question of the eastern provinces. In the pre-revolutionary period, during Patriarch Harutun Vahabedyan's reign, 1889-1910, the Armenian Patriarchate of Jerusalem was in disarray. Some members of the Patriarchate's brotherhood, taking advantage of the Patriarch's old age, ran the affairs of the Patriarchate by appropriating huge sums of money. Prior to the 1908 revolution, Patriarch Magake Ormanyan, the Patriarch of Istanbul, sent an investigative commission to Jerusalem to put things in order. Though the commission did not achieve any substantial result, it led to the banishment of many members of the Brotherhood to areas outside Jerusalem. This disorder and chaos continued until the revolution. The revolution brought with it hopes of freedom, equality, and justice, and ushered in a new era by getting rid of the Ancien regime. It was in this new era that the majority of the members of the Brotherhood of St. James of Jerusalem saw the revolution as the ultimate opportunity to reform the Patriarchate. In their quest for reform, the members of the Brotherhood were also able to mobilize segment of the Armenian lay community of Jerusalem. On the 25th of August 1908, the Brotherhood convened a synod and decided to call back all the exiled priests of the Patriarchate to remedy the situation. After several failed attempts to convince the Patriarch, the Brotherhood sent another letter, this time with the signature of 23 priests from the Synod, informing the Patriarch that the Synod has decided on the return of the exiled priests. When all these attempts failed, the Synod appealed to the Armenian National Assembly in Istanbul, and the question of Jerusalem was born, Yerushalayim Khantire in Armenian. It became one of the most important subjects debated in the assembly. As tension between the local lay community and the Patriarchate intensified in Jerusalem, a person by the name of Avedis, the aide of the Patriarch, who was the de facto running the affairs of the community in cooperation with the Grand Sacristan Tavid, complained to the local government that the members of the lay community were going to attack the Patriarchate. The local community, for its part, appealed to the governor of Jerusalem and requested the removal of Avedis. As a result, the Patriarch's deputy Father Yeria sent a letter to the locum tenens in Istanbul, Yeri Sheturian at the time, the president of the Armenian National Assembly, in which he denounced the underhanded activities of Avedis and the Grand Sacristan. The governor of Jerusalem investigated the situation and, in order to mollify the local population, ordered the Patriarch to remove Avedis from his post. In response, the Patriarch banned 2 priests to Damascus, and an act in which led to members of the Brotherhood to send a letter of protest to the Armenian National Assembly. In addition, they demanded the expulsion of 3 priests who had exploited the administrative incompetence of Patriarch Harutun Vahabedyan. The reading of the letters in the Armenian National Assembly fueled a heated debate among the deputies as to what needed to be done. It's a long debate. I'm just summarizing a couple of points. One deputy explained that the issue is twofold. The first pertaining to the reorganization, and the second pertaining to finding a remedy for the deteriorating situation of the Armenian Patriarchate of Jerusalem. Another deputy answered that there were more essential issues to tackle than Jerusalem and than the Jerusalem problem, and protested that interference of local government in the affairs of the Brotherhood, Meanwhile, the chairman, Minas Cherad, stated that a letter had arrived from Patriarch of Jerusalem, arguing that members of the Brotherhood had attacked the Patriarchate and that he was resigning from his position. Deputy Manugyan in the Armenian National Assembly responded that the national constitution, this is very important, obliged the Armenian National Assembly to exert its authority as regards to the Jerusalem question when the matter dealt with national jurisdiction and financial losses. Archbishop Ismailian, who was presiding over the assembly, proposed that a letter be sent to Patriarch Harutun indicating that the Armenian National Assembly would deal with the issue of Jerusalem. After much debate, the Assembly elected the Jerusalem Investigative Commission on 5 December 1908. The commission that left for Jerusalem was composed of 3 members, 1 priest and 2 lay people, a choice which reflects the extent to which laymen were able to play an important role in ecclesiastic politics and in the aftermath of the revolution. However, the members of Jerusalem opposed the recommendations of the commission. When the members of the commission felt that their lives were under threat from the Patriarch and his clique, they returned to Jaffa. On the 1st of December 1908, Patriarch Harutun Vehabedian sent a letter to the Armenian National Assembly saying that the Synod had agreed on the return of the all exiled priest. In February 1909, the Armenian National Assembly received 2 letters from Jerusalem's Armenian Patriarchate. The first indicated that the investigative commission had not yet presented their recommendations to the Synod and had left to Jaffa. So there's a lot of contradiction. One says they came and the other said they didn't come and they didn't conduct their investigation. The second letter argued that there was no need for an investigation commission when peace and order prevailed in the cathedral. The contradictory statements from Jerusalem elicited much agitated debate in the assembly. On 22nd of May 1909, the report of the investigative commission was read in the National Assembly, after which Patriarch Ismailian gave his farewell speech prior to going to Echmiadzin, in which he commented on the question of Jerusalem, saying, "There are those who say that Jerusalem is free and independent from the Patriarchate of Istanbul. I perceive the freedom when the issue deals with the spiritual jurisdiction of the Patriarch of Jerusalem, if he ordains or expels a priest. But I cannot perceive that Jerusalem, with all its goods and properties, which are the result of people's donation, belong to the Brotherhood." End quote. The commission criticized the Brotherhood, the Synod, Father Revont, who was regarded as responsible for the appropriation of huge sums of money. In addition, the report found Archbishop Yeretsian, the former representative of Jerusalem in Istanbul, responsible for the deteriorating situation in Jerusalem, and considered him an agent of Father Revont. On 5th of July, the Political Council of the Armenian National Assembly decided to depose Patriarch of Jerusalem, Archbishop Harutun Vehabedian, according to the 19th article of the Armenian National Constitution, and elected local tenants from the General Assembly. A commission was formed which decided to remove Patriarch from his position and replaced him with the locum tenens. The General Assembly supported the decision of the Political Council and decided to appoint Father Daniel Hagopian as the local tenant. The position of the Patriarch in Jerusalem remained vacant for 11 years, from 1910 until 1921. In 1921, Yeresheturian was elected Patriarch under the regulations of the Constitution of 1888, the Constitution of the Brotherhood of Jerusalem, except the confirmation was given by the British Crown, not by the Sultan, because the Ottoman Empire had collapsed at the time. The revolution, as we saw, led to radical changes in the dynamics of power within the Armenian quarter of Jerusalem. The micro-revolution taking place in the Armenian community of Istanbul prompted the Armenian clergy of Jerusalem to initiate their own micro-revolution by bringing down their own ancien regime and creating their own new order on the model of their counterpart in Istanbul. Thus, as a result of the transformations taking place in the empire in general and in the Armenian community of Istanbul in particular, the Armenian community of Jerusalem, both laity and clergy, found the revolution a valuable opportunity to root out those whom they accused of unjustly controlling the affairs of the local Armenian Patriarchate. When the efforts of the clergy failed, they appealed to the Armenian National Assembly, demanding its intervention in the crisis, because that they saw the Armenian National Assembly as the highest authority, Armenian authority, within the Ottoman Empire. After the revolution, the Armenian National Assembly became the most important Armenian religio-political center in the empire. However, when the Armenian National Assembly decided to take the matter into its own hands by sending an investigative commission to Jerusalem, the Jerusalem patriarchate, with its brotherhood, feeling that their autonomous status was endangered, immediately resolved their differences and opposed any such encroachments. Now we're going to discuss the Jewish case. On January 25, 1909, Jacques Bicard, Secretary General of the Alliance Israélite Universelle, AIU, wrote to the chief rabbi of the Ottoman Empire, Haim Nachum, expressing his contentment with the revolution by saying, "Thus it may well be said that the whole Turkish revolution is like the triumph of our ideas. Ideas that are so moderate yet so liberal and solely inspired by the love of the common good." End quote. The Young Turk Revolution's impact on the Jews in the empire should be analyzed from two perspectives. One perspective pertains to the micro-revolution that took place inside the Jewish millet, and the other pertains to the increased Zionist activities in the empire after the revolution. The revolution paved the way for the Jewish progressive movement in the empire to start not only reforming their own communities, but also take an active part in the political and economic life of the empire. However, unlike the relatively smooth transition of power in the Armenian community, change in the Jewish community met with some resistance from the people loyal to the previous administration of the locum tenens Rabbi Moshe Halevi. The Jewish progressive movement's first task then was to take the control out of the hands of Halevi, who had occupied the position of locum tenens without any formal appointment for more than 35 years, since 1871. On the 17th of August, the progressives succeeded when Haim Nachum was chosen as the locum tenens. However, his appointment also caused much anxiety in Jewish circles. It is important to stress here that the fact that the tensions emanating from Haim Nachum's appointment as the locum tenens were the outcome of tension between the Zionists and the Alliance Israélite Universelle that escalated after the revolution. Like the election of the locum tenens, the election of chief rabbi of the Ottoman Empire occupied a central position in the Jewish press in Istanbul. On January 24, 1908, Nachum was elected as chief rabbi with 74 votes. His opponents protested the election, arguing that only 3/4 of the delegates participated in the election. Nachum was ushered into the office with a policy focused on that emphasized the reorganization of Istanbul's Jewish community and aimed at centralizing power by attempting to bring the provinces under his grip. Immediately after his accession, accession letter by attempting began to pour into the office of chief rabbinate from the provinces, demanding the dismissal of their local rabbis. We see this a lot, letters going from the provinces of the Jewish communities, sending letters to the chief rabbi asking that their own local rabbis should be dismissed and leave their positions. Demonstrations against their respective rabbis were held in the Jewish communities of Damascus, Sidon, and Jerusalem. The governors of these localities also telegraphed the Sublime Porte, arguing in support of the demonstrators. In response, the Minister of Justice wrote to the locum tenens demanding that he take action without delay. On September 3, the Secular Council of the Jewish National Assembly, General Assembly, convened under the presidency of the locum tenens Rabbi Haim Nachum and decided to dismiss these 3 rabbis. Of these dismissals, the question of the chief rabbinate of Jerusalem became the most important one, highlighting the centrality of ecclesiastic politics after the revolution. The question of Jerusalem was high on the agenda of the chief rabbinate of Istanbul, not only because of its strategic position, as Jerusalem spiritually at its strategic position, but also because of the competition there between those who supported the Alliance group and those who supported the conservatives or the Zionists. The struggle over the position of the chief rabbinate of Jerusalem began after the death of Chief Rabbi Yaakov Shaul El-Yashar. In 1906, the governor of Jerusalem, Rashid Pasha, appointed Rabbi Shlomo Mani as locum tenens and ordered him to organize elections for the chief rabbi of Jerusalem. 2 groups eventually competed for this position. One supported the candidacy of Chaim Moshe El-Yashar, the son of the deceased, whereas the second backed the candidacy of Yaakov Meir, a graduate of the Alliance Israélite Universelle. The latter group was composed of the liberals such as Albert Antabi, the representatives of the AIU in Palestine, and Avraham Alimelech, while the former was headed by conservatives who wanted to maintain the status quo. Most of the Oriental Jewish groups, Yemenites, Bukharites, Persians, supported Rabbi Yaakov Meir with the hope that if elected, their political status would be improved. Local Jewish press also took opposing stances. Chavatzelet, for instance, supported Eliashar, while Hashkafa supported the candidacy of Yaakov Meir. The elections were held, and Rabbi Yaakov Meir emerged as the winner. The Ashkenazi community did not participate in the elections and complained to the local tenants in Istanbul, Rabbi Moshe Halevi, on the grounds that Albert Antabi had influenced over the governor and prevented them from participating in the elections. Rabbi Moshe Halevi in turn annulled the elections and removed Rabbi Yaakov Meir. However, as Rabbi Meir was on good terms with the governor of Jerusalem, he did not leave his post until the arrival of the new governor Ali Ekram Bey, after which he left for Salonika and became the chief rabbi of Salonika and became a very popular figure within the Jewish community of Salonika. However, on his part, Rabbi Moshe Halevi then appointed Rabbi Eliyahu Moshe Panigel, Eliashar's father-in-law, to be the locum tenens of Jerusalem and oversee the elections for the new chief rabbi. The locum tenens of Istanbul chief rabbinate, Rabbi Moshe Halevi, along with the conservative-backed Rabbi Panigel. This is Rabbi Panigel, the picture, as you can see. With the appointment of Rabbi Panigel, the struggles once more began between two camps. The Ashkenazi community of Jerusalem supported Rabbi Panigel, whereas the supporters of Rabbi Yaakov Meir opposed him. Those who supported him represented his incumbency as a time when the community and the institutions had flourished. However, historian Rashid Sharabi notes that according to the newspapers Havatzelet, he mismanaged the affairs of the community. He raised the taxes of his opponents and marginalized the Yemenites Jews who were supporters of the Rabbi Yaakov Meir. Panigel became close to Ezra, which was a Zionist organization, in order to counteract the efforts of the alliance in Jerusalem. He did not organize any elections for the chief rabbinate, but rather he wrote a letter to Moshe Halevi, the chief rabbi of the locum tenens of the chief rabbinate of the Ottoman Empire, asking him to appoint him as the chief rabbi of Jerusalem on the grounds that he was very popular. However, the situation changed with the revolution. The election of Chaim Nahum as the locum tenens of the chief rabbinate of Turkey and the appointment of the new governor of Jerusalem. This was a great boon for the opposition camp of Jerusalem, the supporters of Rabbi Yaakov Meir. Rabbi Nahum implemented the demand of Albert Antabi, the representative of the alliance, and his movement to dismiss Panigel from his position, and they did so on November the 4th, when Rabbi Panigel was ordered to leave and resign his position. This caused much excitement among the city's Jewish community. Chaim Nahum, next step was to appoint Hezkiah Shabbatai, the chief rabbi of Aleppo, as the locum tenens of Jerusalem, and ordered him to hold elections. However, he failed to do so because Panigel camp refused to cooperate. The Ashkenazi community too refused to take any part, partly because of their disappointment with Panigel. Unable to hold elections, he returned to Aleppo and appointed his friend Rabbi Nachman Batito as the locum tenens. No one wanted to get the responsibility of dealing with Jerusalem at the time. However, Batito as well was unable to hold elections despite the fact that 5 candidates were nominated. Once more, the whole issue was stalemated because of the pro-Panigel and anti-Panigel movements. This led Rabbi Chaim Nahum to pay a special visit to Jerusalem to force a compromise in which the Rabbi Yaakov Meir would be appointed as the chief rabbi and Rabbi Panigel in the picture would be his deputy. However, the Jewish community of Salonika made sure that Rabbi Meir did not leave his position. The situation stagnated under Rabbi Chaim Nahum. Situation stagnated until Chaim Nahum removed Batito from his position and appointed the rabbi of Rhodes, Moshe Yosef Franco, as the chief rabbi of Jerusalem. This was the Jewish case. Now moving to the Arab provinces in general, but mostly the Mount Lebanon. The impact of the Young Turk Revolution on the Arab provinces should be viewed not only from the perspective of the Arab provinces themselves, but also from the imperial palace. After all, it is there that the close confidence of the Sultan from the Arab provinces, who played the role of intermediaries keeping a fine-tuned balance between the local notables, the ayans, and the palace, found their end. And most important notables, most important advisors in the case of Mount Lebanon would be the brothers Salim and Najib Malhami, who played a dominant role with the Maronite patriarch at the time. On first sight, it appears that the revolution did not indeed cause serious changes in the dynamics of power in the Arab provinces. Making a generalization about the impact of the revolution on the Arab provinces would, however, be misleading. The euphoric feelings and mass demonstrations in the cities of the Arab provinces after the revolution should not be perceived as the beginning of a mass movement. Each city was influenced in a different way. For example, the politics of notables in Damascus was not the same as the politics of notables in Beirut or Mount Lebanon or Palestine. Hence, though every locality was influenced by the Young Turk Revolution, the impact varied from district to district depending on the local exigencies. When the news of the revolution arrived in the Arab provinces, local authorities received it with reservation and were unwilling to declare constitution valid. Some were skeptical about the news, while others feared that such a step would lead to the erosion of social and political stability. In addition to the local officials, the notables and the ulema were stunned by the news. They were afraid that the revolution and the shift of the center of power from the local authorities to the CUP would endanger their traditional source of legitimacy, power, status, and prestige. These fears certainly had a basis in fact. After the revolution, CUP branches and clubs mushroomed in Syria, and although these organizations began local initiatives, they eventually were taken over by the Central Committee of CUP in Salonika. The CUP branches threatened the notables and ulema by temporarily becoming the de facto force in local politics in the Syrian districts during the post-revolution political gap. For the sake of time, I'm only going to concentrate on Mount Lebanon. Since 1861, Mount Lebanon enjoyed local autonomy under the Règlement Organique, something that all of us know, which was guaranteed by the international powers together with the Ottoman Empire. As we know, Règlement Organique was established as a result of the bloody civil war that took place over the mountain in 1860. In Mount Lebanon, news of the reinstatement of the constitution was received with certain reservation, as society split into two sections over whether or not the mountain should take part in the Ottoman parliament. Because taking part in the Ottoman parliament would mean that Lebanon is an integral part of, not an autonomous entity, but an integral part of the Ottoman Empire like the other provinces, and would violate its autonomous status. The Maronite clerical circles opposed such a move, whereas the Druze, the Greek Orthodox, and other minority sects were in favor of it. On the 20th of August, the British consul Cumberbatch reported that proclivity towards sending representatives to the new parliament grew stronger with the joining of a Maronite anti-clerical or liberal movement party to the pro-parliamentary group. The consul further reported that this group belonged to the adverse clerical party but was showing an inclination to associate itself with the liberals. The centrality of the Maronite Patriarchate is a key factor in understanding the impact of the revolution on Mount Lebanon. This indicates that the constitution did not only create tensions between the different sects over on the mountain, it also opened a new door for the anti-clerical Maronite movement to attempt to rid itself of its own ancien regime through the inclusion of Lebanon in the Ottoman parliament. By doing so, they would avert the authority of Maronite Patriarch Ilyas Butrus al-Huwayyik, who ruled until 1931, from 1899 to 1931, who was not excited about the constitution. It is important to mention here that Patriarch al-Huwayyik shared a common caution with Abdul Hamid and his group, and Abdul Hamid and his group therefore opposed any social or political change. The Hamidian regime, which protected the autonomous status of Lebanon, was crucial in guaranteeing the authority of Patriarch al-Huwayyik in the mountain. Patriarch al-Huwayq and his church also secured their authority through the intercession of two key Maronite figures in the palace of Abdul Hamid, Najib and Salim Malhamid that I mentioned before. So once the ancien regime, the Sultan Abdul Hamid's clique collapses, his interest would collapse too. Furthermore, al-Huwayq and Abdul Hamid had common enemies: radical secularizing elements, parliamentarism, decentralization, and linguistic proto-nationalism. For Abdul Hamid and al-Huwayq, the Young Turk and the anti-clerical Maronite both threatened the stability of the existing order. With the Young Turk revolution and the downfall of the Malhamid brothers, the anti-clerical movement on the mountain grew stronger and their activities increased in order, as in the words of the British Consul Cumberbatch, and I quote, in order to curtail the baneful influence of the Maronite clergy and to introduce greatly needed administrative reforms, end of quote. In the end, the status quo won out. It's a long story, but just to summarize. On the 30th of October, British Consul Cumberbatch sent a letter to the British ambassador claiming that the inhabitants of Lebanon persisted in their refusal to send deputies to the parliament. After much debate in political circles, the Administrative Council of the Mountain voted against representation in the Ottoman parliament. To conclude, so despite the fact that the revolution aimed at creating the modern secular Ottoman citizen whose loyalty was going to be to the state, it nevertheless indirectly strengthened the ethno-religious political, indirectly or directly, strengthened the ethno-religious political centers of ethnic groups. It did so by creating the space in which fierce competition began among the different actors within these communities for control over power position. In the Jewish case, the center of power remained in the Chacham Bashlik, the chief rabbinate. The election of Nahum Pasha as the chief rabbi strengthened the Chacham Bash's role as the ethno-religious representative of the Sephardic Jews, but this became increasingly difficult in a period where new actors emerged in the public sphere in the Ottoman Empire. The Zionists, who aimed at winning over the public opinion of the Sephardic Jewry of the empire for their activities, were considered an undesirable element in the empire by the chief rabbinate and by many other prominent Sephardic figures. In the Armenian case, the center of the power shifted smoothly from the Patriarchate to the Armenian National Assembly, but still Patriarchate remained an important figure institution. The Armenian National Assembly, which became the representative of the Armenian ethnic groups in the empire, and unlike the Jewish case, the ANA included representative of most of the Armenian political currents. And after the Adana massacres, it became the battleground between the different Armenian political groups. The major argument there was whether we should cooperate with the CUP or not. Finally, the contested city of Jerusalem, not finally, but the contested city of Jerusalem provided a good case study of the struggles and complexity of post-revolutionary period. In the confines of the old city walls, the echoes of the revolution brought hope to the disenchanted elements in these communities. The waves of micro-revolutions taking place within the communities in Istanbul echoed in Jerusalem. What followed was an internal struggle between the different elements of these communities, a struggle that can be best understood, one taking place between secularism, religion on the one hand, and localism and nationalism on the other. In the case of Mutasarrifiyya of Lebanon, the situation was more complex than in Damascus, Latakia, Nablus, Beirut, and other Arab provinces. For more than half a century, the Règlement Organique created what then Engin Akarlı calls the long-lasting peace. Everyone knows about that. Despite the fact that the events of 1861 were a long period, despite the fact that after the events of 1861 there was a long period of peace, some elements of the Lebanese society remained discontented. The Young Turk Revolution provided the ultimate chance for these elements to change the balance of power on the mountain. The Administrative Council of the Mutasarrifiyya, which was more important than any other administrative council in the Arab provinces in the region, became a battle zone between the notable families of the mountains, the Maronite Church, and the laity. Thank you very much.